Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am currently on vacation until July 29th. So what I did was I pre-recorded a bunch of great interviews and fantastic conversation with so many wonderful guests. You will continue to see them posted over the duration of when I am away. So I can't thank you enough for still tuning in. And real quickly, before we dive into it, if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up button as well. It goes a long way. And secondly, if you are looking to buy tickets for any event out there, if you are a new user to SeatGeek, you get $20 off of your purchase by utilizing the promo code Brodes. That's $20 off of your tickets. It eliminates those fees. It's a no-brainer. Thank you all so much and enjoy the show. What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into, I was going to say sports talk with Brodes, but it's actually technically schmoozed. We are here with Bob Wankel, CrossingBroad. We're talking some Phillies baseball as they just finished their series with the Marlins. They swept them. It's the AllStar Break, but we'll begin here. What's up, Bob? What's going on?
Good to talk to you, man. Seems like you're a pretty busy guy these days, so glad we could catch up and talk a little red-hot Phillies baseball right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely been a crazy 1 week stretch, but we're just grinding, a lot of emotions. But, all right, we'll start with this. Are you surprised they swept the Miami Marlins? I didn't see that coming. I was hoping they showed us a little something, knowing that there was going to be a big downtime without any baseball, but they exceeded my expectations, which I'll take any day of the week.
Yeah, I'm absolutely stunned. I mean, you probably saw it at the end of today's game. First time in 12 years that they've swept the series down there. This team has really given the Phillies problems the last number of years. Over the last 3 years, actually, I believe Miami's 27-21 against the Phillies straight up, which when you consider the Phillies are a high payroll team with good expectations or great expectations, and the Marlins stink, that makes that record even worse. So, yeah, going down there this weekend, considering the way that they had played, especially in Toronto, kind of bats went cold in St. Louis and carried over into Toronto. Yeah, it didn't look good, especially the way the game started on Friday night. So for them to rebound, sweep this series, it's really impressive, and it's just one of many impressive wins that this team has had over the last month or so.
So when you look at this first half and how it finished and how it started, and I guess in the middle as well, how would you describe this first half for the Phils? You got me?
Yeah, I lost you there.
That's cool. No, it's cool. I'll repeat. Just in general, when you look at the first half of the Phillies schedule, how would you personally describe it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's been a roller coaster. I was a guy that came into this season and really felt like that this team was good enough that the additions of Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos not only were going to really support an offense and lengthen an offense that needed a little bit more than just Bryce Harper and Rhys Hoskins. Obviously, Schwarber, 29 home runs at the AllStar break. They've gotten what they've expected from him, even though he's had a little bit of a weird first half. I mean, the guy's hitting a shade over 200. The OPS is only 820, despite the fact that he's tracking like 45 home runs right now. He's having a strange year, but more than just deepening the lineup, I thought that those additions were going to give this team a little bit of edge, a little bit more of a killer instinct. And it did not materialize that way for the first 2 months of the season. Now, obviously, they fired Joe Girardi, and since then, it has materialized. And maybe teams with a lesser veteran presence would have folded. This team did not, and for them to be 6 games over at the AllStar break, I think is extremely impressive. The fact that if the season ended today, they'd be in the postseason is extremely impressive. I mean, I know they've left a little bit of meat on the bone, but when you just step back and look at the whole thing, I think you have to kind of grade it as like a B+. They are right where I think a lot of people had hoped they would be.
I absolutely agree with that. Now, let's get to the disappointing thing, and that's Nick Castellanos. I can't believe we are now somewhat sneaking our way into August, and it's this bad still. I remember about a month ago or so, I said, all right, Nick, it's time to turn this puppy around. Everyone goes through some disappointing times in a season, but enough is enough, and it's still awful. I can't believe it. I thought the DH spot opening up would give him that more of a mental rest in the defensive side of the baseball, but it is atrocious, and I almost wonder, maybe it's too premature for this question, but is there a correlation with this not being Cincinnati anymore? Now we're screaming about it on the Philadelphia sports airwaves. It's a different beast playing in this city, but he's also a weird dude who I think doesn't really take that into consideration. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just searching for answers, and that's not really one of them.
Yeah, listen, that was the signing that made me go, hey, listen, this team can be competitive too. This team is here. They mean business. And not just because they went over the salary threshold and they're talking about, hey, we're going to step up and finally pay the tax. That's all fine and well. It signals that we're going to be even more competitive. But beyond just signaling their intent, I just felt like, hey, here comes 55 doubles. Here comes 25, 30 home runs. And here comes a dog, a dog in a good way, a guy that's just tenacious and will talk and run his mouth and get guys fired up and kind of puff out the chest a little bit. And we haven't seen any of that. And it's hard for a player to do that when things aren't going well. And I do think that there's some expectations. Obviously, you have the money, talking about $100 million. He's expected to produce. And when you're not producing the way that you want to, it's hard to kind of pump the chest and say LFG into the dugout all the time and get guys fired up, right? But it's amazing. We're looking at his numbers and we're like, well, over the last 10 days, he's hitting 272 and he's showing signs of life. But then you look at, into the box score deeper and he's got one extra base hit. He just is not hitting the ball consistently with authority. And it's baffling. It is baffling because he is a guy I've watched for the last handful of years. And I thought he was the perfect offensive complement to this lineup. And he's been anything but. He's been a disaster.
I was talking to Farzi about this, and I don't know if this is dropping before Farzi's or after Farzi's, so let's get weird with it. But he actually brought this up, and my face went nuts. I don't see this ever happening. But after the AllStar break, let's say 2 weeks after, Nick Castellanos is still struggling. Could you see a scenario where Rhys Hoskins is out in the outfield, Derek Hall might be in the field, someone else is DHing, to the point where they legitimately give him some time off to refresh even more? I know one thing about Rob Thompson to this point as a manager. He's going to stick to the vets and say, I believe in you. So when I heard him say that, I'm like, Farzi, I don't know what you were drinking before we hit that start button. What would your reaction be if you were in on that combo?
Well, let me tell you, this is the first time in about 15 days that I haven't had a beer. So we're recording this. And I mean, Nick Castellanos is hitting 250. And as underwhelming as he's been, it's not like the guy's hitting 163 right now. And considering that they're so heavily invested in him, not just this year, but beyond this year for the next handful of years, I just don't think you can do that to the player. I think that that type of move would have significant ramifications in the clubhouse, and I don't think they'd be positive. I think you have to give him every opportunity to continue to try to work his way out of this. And so long as he's going to hit 250, 260 and not absolutely kill you, I just don't see that happening. And I love the Derek Hall story. It's been great. He's given them a huge jolt in the middle of that lineup during a time where they desperately needed it. And I don't want to diminish what he is or what he's done, but he did not hit left-handed pitching at the minor league level. I do not think that he will at the major league level. And, let's see how he does once he gets 150 plate appearances under his belt and pitchers really kind of get a book on him and see how they attack. And again, I've been really impressed with him. And if he can continue to just kind of be a 250, 260 guy, a handful of extra base hits per week, the Phillies have to be to the moon about that. But I'm not willing to bench Nick Castellanos and put Rhys Hoskins of all players in the outfield. I can't do that.
I know, I'm right there with you. I was laughing for sure. But there are a lot of positives with this team, but I do have some negative things to discuss just because, well, we're dissecting the whole package here in the first half. And what the hell's wrong with Didi Gregorius? Finally, we saw a little bit of power there, but I am stunned that we are sitting here, even though he does miss time and he does miss games due to injuries at this point of his career. And there's plenty of moments where he flashes the leather nicely, but there's also times where he forgets how many outs there are, and I just don't remember that being Didi Gregorius. So I don't know. What do you see when you're watching Didi?
Yeah, it's been tough. I mean, listen, you can make an argument that the worst thing that happened to the 2022 Phillies is that 2020 Didi Gregorius played as well as he did over those 60 games because he comes back and he gets that 2-year deal, and the Phillies now it's a disaster. I mean, Didi Gregorius is giving them Desi Relaford type production at shortstop. I mean, He's been bad. And listen, he hits his first home run on Saturday after 188 plate appearances this season. And he's a guy that has always had that poolside pop. And earlier in the year, I kind of was complimenting him. I'm like, hey, listen, he's not driving the ball on a consistent basis, but he's using left field more. He's willing to stay up the middle a little bit more than he has. That's when he was hitting 300. Now, since then, he hasn't been as lucky with the balls in play. He just has not hit the ball consistently hard. I don't know if it's the knee. I don't know if it's the elbow lingering over from last year, but he's just obviously not the same hitter. And listen, we could talk about the trade deadline, beginning of August. What does this team need to do? I don't want to jump out ahead of you if that's where you want to go. But I would say that there are some obvious upgrades this team needs to make. But I would not rule out getting a little bit creative and saying, hey, is there a way that maybe we can provide an upgrade to the left side of that infield? And if the opportunity was there, I wouldn't be surprised if they took it.
I'm not against it either, although I have been dying on the hill of it's not that I'm some huge diehard Didi Gregorius believer, but sometimes I watch people. It's the same with Nick Castellanos, honestly. It's like, I don't think he's a bad baseball player. I think he's playing bad baseball. And with Didi, I don't believe he sucks at baseball, but I just think he's really struggling right now, trying to find himself maybe at this point of his career with the injuries. But I don't think he sucks and he's a bad baseball player. But if you can upgrade with his current status, I'm not going to look away from that either. So let's get into the trade deadline. And I ask you this. If you are Dave Dombrowski, do you look at Bryce Harper and Gene Segura coming back as a huge chunk of your trade deadline acquisitions, or is that flawed, or is that a portion of how you do it? Like, he's clearly going to make more and bring in more players, but if you look the fan base in the eyes during a press conference and you use that, well, you're bringing back an NL MVP and you're bringing back someone who could hit 280, 290 in that range in Gene Segura, is that something that he could use to his advantage, but the fans say, that doesn't smell right? How do you view that whole situation?
Yeah, look, I don't think ideally that's what you want to do. You're talking about hand injuries with both players, or hand and thumb injuries. What are you getting from those players when they're back? Like, yeah, maybe Gene Segura can get out on the field and beat the timeline and be out there in the middle of August. Okay, great. What's he going to be when he gets back? When Bryce Harper gets back, let's just say September 5th. Sounds like a good date. You get Bryce Harper back the last 20, 25 games of the season. Well, what's Bryce Harper going to be when he gets back? Is he going to be the MVP that he was last year? Is he going to be the player that he was at the beginning of this year? You don't know that. So I think because the timeline's uncertain, and then just what are you getting once these guys are on the field, that's an uncertainty as well. I think that you have to do something to upgrade this offense. Now, we talk about the left side of the infield, but if there was a priority, where can I upgrade myself offensively? It's a left-handed bat that can play center field. And listen, for the last 4 or 5 months, we've had these arguments about Mickey Moniak, and he deserves a chance, and why not Mick? And, why not Odubel Herrera? Because he was a former All-Star, and he can get hot for stretches. Neither player is the answer. It's clear as day that neither one of these guys is going to be a long-term viable solution. If you want to make the playoffs, you want to get to your 88 wins, you need somebody that you can platoon with Matt Vierling, who's done a really nice job since he was recalled. You got to solidify things out there. That's the move to make from an offensive standpoint. Now, listen, they can get creative. The market's the market. You don't want to overspend. If you can find value, if you can make marginal upgrades elsewhere, great. That's fantastic. But I just feel like that is the most obvious way to improve this offense right now.
Are there names that stand out to you when looking, ahead here?
No, listen, I hate playing this game. I know that
I agree.
I hate Andrew. I know Andrew Benintendi's been thrown out there. It makes a lot of sense. But no, I just think until you know who's going to be a seller, who's going to be a buyer. And let me give you an example of that. I think the Phillies need to upgrade their starting rotation. I think that it's an underrated group, but the news of Zach Eflin throwing, this weekend, reporting some soreness today, it just does not bode well. And I'm not saying that he's done for the year or that he's cooked or anything like that. I like Zach Eflin a lot, but I'd be nervous about that. So to me, you need to bring in another starting pitcher. Well, here's a guy I would have loved to have brought in about 2 weeks ago. Would have made a ton of sense. Johnny Cueto. 1-year deal, not making a lot of money. He's pitching his ass off right now for the White Sox. They were 7 games out a week and a half ago in the AL Central. Well, guess what? Now they're only 3 games out. Johnny Cueto's probably not going anywhere. So I think you just have to let things materialize, let the market develop before you start dialing in on names.
What's next for Zach Eflin? Every time it seems that there's an injury that limits him. And when they did the arbitration stuff, I'm like, hey, that's great. When Zach Eflin is good, he's really good. And when he gets through these injuries, it does keep him off the diamond. And yet again, here's another season. So I don't despise their thought process. And that's normally how I analyze sports. I know you can just react to what happens and then scream, but I normally like to see the blueprint or hear the blueprint. And if it fails, as long as I can get behind behind the idea of it. I'm not going to rip you into shreds because, like, there sometimes is something in sports and in life where the thought, just the plan and the steps are very logical. It's just unfortunate and unlucky at times. I don't hate what they did with Zach Eflin, but I can't run away from the reality either, which is he's never there.
He's never there, and that's the bottom line. Listen, I am in that locker room at times and talk to guys, and of the Phillies that I've had conversations with, I'll be honest with you, I really like Zach Eflin. I just think he's a good guy. I think he's a good pitcher. I think that he had to overcome some questionable coaching and philosophical things earlier in his career, really tried to find who he is as a pitcher. And it feels like every time he's on the brink of sort of taking that jump, something's happened. He's had a setback. He's been a little bit star-crossed since he's been here. And, I mean, listen, I like what the Phillies did. They said, here's $5.5 million this year, mutual option next year, $15 million. I would imagine that Zach Eflin at this point would probably take that $15 million next year and not waive it and try to sign a long-term deal just because of the injury situation. I don't know what the Phillies' appetite for Zach Eflin's going to be, though, if he can only give you 19 starts a year. And, I mean, we'll see what happens here. But I do not think that this most recent news, basically 25 days after he was shut down for good and more than a month after he initially experienced the discomfort in his knee, I believe it was June 9th was the first time it happened, for him not to be ready to go here at this point, I think is very, very concerning.
Yeah, I absolutely see it the same way. And I'm kind of enjoying just picking at some people here. And since arbitration came up, I instantly go to just Rhys Hoskins and where he's at. And I always go to Scott Boras. It's never fun working with him. Rhys is an interesting guy. He gives you sometimes a 2-week stretch where he is your offense, 6 RBI, 2 home runs. We've seen it year in and year out, but there's a lot of downs when you go through the Rhys Hoskins experience. There's a lot of DHs here. There's a lot of bad defenders here. Do you see Rhys Hoskins in a Phillies uniform long term?
It's such a great question, and I've answered it every different way imaginable every time it gets asked to me. And I will say I don't see Rhys Hoskins with the Phillies in 2024. It doesn't mean that he's a bad player. It doesn't mean that if I were a fan, I wouldn't want him here. I've just kind of always banged the drum that there's something a little bit off with the makeup of this team. And I don't think it's Rhys Hoskins' fault. But when you start to say, like, how can we really change our roster? How can we really change the dynamics in our clubhouse? And again, I'm not saying that he's the thing that needs to be changed, but they have a lot of older players, big contracts that are more difficult to move. Right now, who are you going to move? Rhys Hoskins, who's has one more year of arbitration eligibility in 23, or Nick Castellanos, who's owed $80 million for another 4 years. I mean, so that Rhys Hoskins has the more tradable contract. He's a good guy. He can get hot. He can carry you for stretches. I just think that he's a player that would be really interesting for a lot of other teams. And then what the Phillies have here now is they have Alec Bones, and credit to him. He's swinging the bat better lately. He's made himself into a functional defensive player at third, but I guess at the end of the day, I don't envision Alec Bones at third and Rhys Hoskins at first long term. And if I had to guess, it's going to be Hoskins. You mentioned Scott Boras. I just don't know how many guys can you take on at $100 million plus for a handful of years that profile in somewhat similar fashion.
Yeah, the Alec Bones, Rhys Hoskins thing, it's always seemed to be tied together. And we've spoken so many times about my, disinterest. I don't know what the right word is for Alec Bones. But if we get what we saw in St. Louis, this is what people need to understand with me. He was phenomenal before he got injured sliding into second base with some power. I don't expect him to steal hits from Nolan Arenado the way that he did at third consistently, but there was just a different level with his extension and just his confidence at the plate that he was hitting singles all year. But that's an Alec Bones that could be a difference maker with some just extra base hits and things of that nature, and that's where the bar is for me. So I'm not going to settle for anything less than that if what we saw in St. Louis is in him,
I can't remember a player in recent history like Alec Bones. I know that a lot of people draw the Jason Worth comparison, a really good athlete, good size, and it just took him a while to sort of figure it out and kind of unlock the power. It took him to his later 20s to do it, and some people are hoping that Bones on that similar trajectory. I don't know that that's a fair comparison, but I will say this. I mean, you look at the way that he's played now over the last few weeks, batting average is up to 276 here at the AllStar break. OPS is nipping at 700. Obviously, that's not good enough for a corner infielder, but it's better. And you're starting to just see these flashes. And you look at the size, and you just start to wonder, like, is it there? And you don't want the Phillies to quit on that too early in the process. And so I think that he certainly gets the remainder of this year to figure it out. And then I think the Phillies are going to have a really difficult decision to make, not just in 23, but long term. Like, what do we have with this guy? Is he really worth gambling on again and again?
All right, I got two more for you. With Rob Thompson, the team's playing great baseball. We know that. Is he the future manager of the Phillies? It's weird because I haven't really heard much of it even being brought up at all, unless, I don't know, I'm just not seeing it or whatnot. But, like, are they going to interview some other bigger names in the offseason? Are they interested in other guys? They're winning. They're winning a lot. He seems to have that clubhouse exactly the way we would like it, right? But I don't know. If a big name comes up, are they willing to look in another direction? I haven't heard anything. Have you?
Yeah, I mean, how palatable is the big name at this point? You went
That's
out and
a
you
great
did that
point.
with Joe Girardi, right? Like you went out and you got the guy, former Yankees manager, World Series winner, well-respected in the industry, all of those things. He's going to be an adult in the room. That's what we heard when I was at that press conference when he was introduced, and it was like, okay, the Phillies are now a team of prestige under Joe Girardi. Well, it didn't work out. So for me, like, I hate to cop out and say, like, hey, listen, he's got 70 games left to prove whether or not he's the guy. If the Phillies make the playoffs for the first time in 10 years, I don't know how he's not the guy next year. I don't know how you don't give him a chance. But when you consider where this team was on Memorial Day and where they're at right now as we're having this conversation, you could not have asked for anything more than what this guy has brought to this clubhouse. I think that he is relaxed some players. I think that he has instilled confidence in these players. I think he's done a fantastic job. And it's a flawed team, and they're going to go through dark days like they just did earlier this week. It's an imperfect team. They will struggle at points. But the fact that we are talking about, hey, should they go for it? Hey, can they make the playoffs? I think that tells you everything you need to know. I mean, I think they love the guy, and I would not be surprised if he is the manager next year.
Lastly, do they make the playoffs this year?
Listen, I've said all along, except for, like on Memorial Day, that they were a playoff team this year. I really think that what they've done now is they have validated that they are worth doubling down on. They are worth additions at the trade deadline. And it doesn't mean it's going to work. Maybe you get Ian Kennedy in the back of your bullpen and it's a disaster. So, but I think that they're going to add.
Real quick, David Robertson, baby.
Yeah.
David Robertson.
He would be perfect for this team.
You know what the reaction would be, though? You know what? Unfortunately, the reaction would be so crazy, heavily, wildly negative. Yet it's coming from probably people that haven't watched him pitch 1 second in Chicago.
I know. I think they will. I don't believe in – because I think it's process of elimination. The Giants were ice cold. They've been playing better. I don't think that the Giants and Padres are both in, and I think that the Phillies are better than both Milwaukee and St. Louis as currently constructed. There's a caveat there. So I think it's really going to be, hey, who does what down the stretch over the next 2.5, 3 weeks to get themselves better. But I think that the way that the Phillies schedule unfolds, and listen, one thing they've proven this year is that they can beat bad teams. They're doing that. And they have plenty of opportunities to continue to do that over the last 2.5 months. And if they add, with Harper, Segura coming back, I think this is a playoff team. 88 wins, I think, does it, and I think they get there.
Yeah, no, I do feel that this team, and sometimes it does still peek its ugly head once in a while where you go, back to the old Phils. But more times than not, I feel we're tweeting out the old Phillies would lose this game more than we are, back to the old Phils. It happens wins. But to be fair, that's what a wild card team probably would do. They're not winning their division because they do let that one slip that maybe the Atlanta Braves wouldn't. Or, I don't know who's going to end up winning the division, but that's the separation between that 88 win or that 94 win is those 6 games, 7 games, 8 games that maybe you squeeze out with a little bit more talent or polished roster compared to where you're at. But get me into the postseason. It's time. Wheeler, Nola, you get the best versions of them, even though hypothetically you could be going up against a DeGrom, Scherzer, or something like that. I just want to see it. Damn it, it's time.
It is absolutely time. The city deserves it. It's been a very, very long time since baseball's mattered in the month of October, and I'll tell you what, I miss it. I know I'm supposed to be objective journalist guy, but listen, I grew up as a Phillies fan. I love the Phillies growing up. All my friends and family are Phillies fans. I would love for nothing more to see them finally put it together.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, I can't thank you enough, man. You do a great job in Crossing Broad. I'll put all your information down below, and we'll do this again sometime very soon.
All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.